think most of us will agree there's one thing that usually goes wrong with someone's turkey. Like you go to someone's house, whether it's a family member, or maybe even you're cooking a turkey yourself. What's the number one thing that just seems like it can always ruin a great turkey? When you take that first bite, and a lot of times you really can't tell by looking at it, but when you take that first bite, oh, it's so dry. And it's so easy to do. You really need to focus in a week before your cook on how to get that perfect turkey. And today what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give you my tips on how to make sure your turkey comes out incredibly juicy. Nobody wants to eat that dry turkey. You know, you're like splashing water on it, and it's just not good. You know, if you just put a little bit of attention into the turkey up front, you won't have that problem. And it all starts with the first step. And the first step is a very simple step. Most of our turkeys, I'd say, most people probably go to the store and they get a frozen turkey. Or it was, frozen before, and maybe the grocery store is selling it as fresh, but it was probably frozen. And so it's probably frozen on the inside. And only giving a turkey of any size 3-4 days to thaw is simply not enough. It might feel like it's enough. When you touch the outside, it feels like it's thaw. You think it's thaw, but deep down inside, that turkey's still frozen. And so that's the first trick to making sure you get a juicy turkey, is to making sure you have even cooking. And to get even cooking, you have to have that turkey, the whole thing, about the same temperature. And so that takes at least, personally, I'm aiming for 6 to 8 days or so refrigeration after I pull it, from the grocery store and I know it's frozen. Now, if it's partially frozen, you might be able to cut that back to 4 or 5. Obviously, a 15-pound turkey is going to take a lot less time than a 25-pound turkey. So, you got to use your sense there. But typically, it's just a shade more than a week for me. The very next step to making sure you have a juicy turkey is the brine. And the brine starts the day before the cook. And so typically, if you're cooking on Thanksgiving, gonna do this on that Wednesday before Thanksgiving, or maybe it's Christmas. Well, do it on Christmas Eve, or maybe you're doing your dinner on Christmas Eve and you need to do it on the 23rd. But you need that night before. And so you really wanna get somewhere around 18 hours or so brine time. You can do a dry brine. Personally, when it comes to making sure I get the perfect turkey, I'm gonna do both a wet brine and a little bit of a version of a dry brine. And that dry brine for me is just to make sure the skin is nice and crispy. But the wet brine really helps in making sure your bird stays moist. Now, in full disclosure, there's one tip that I've done videos on. I'm not gonna do it here because typically a holiday bird, a Thanksgiving or Christmas turkey, there's a stigma as far as how it looks when it's served. And when you go to carve it, and if you spatchcock it, you're gonna have a much better chance of getting a juicy bird. But when you spatchcock it, you're cutting the spine out of the back of the bird, and you get to lay it flat on the smoker that way. So you're gonna get a much more even cook. However, it doesn't present as well. So because it's a holiday bird, I'm not gonna spatchcock it. I think I can overcome what benefit I'll get out of spatchcocking it by doing these other things. So let me show you how we're gonna do this brine. It's pretty simple, it's easy. You can do it in a matter of 20 or 30 minutes. Put the turkey in it, let it sit overnight, at least 12, 18 hours, 18 preferably if you have a larger bird. Next, we're gonna go ahead and bring this water to a boil, and that's so we can get all these flavors and seasonings that we're gonna put in here to blend really well.
going to use the Rectech pellet smoker for the cook today. The reason for that is pellet smoking is a moist environment, so you don't need any water pans. It's just kind of naturally moist. Plus, I'm going to be cooking the turkey in a pan full of its own juices, so that's going to help tremendously. Love how you can turn the Rectech on right from the app, watch it come to life. You can also change the set temperature, whether you're home or anywhere that has internet connection. We're going to start the smoke at 250. I'm going to go ahead and fill the pellets up with Rectech Ultimate Blend. Love this pellet. It's a very dry pellet, so it burns really well and has a wonderful, wonderful flavor. And now we're going to get our pan out and put our turkey from the brine into the pan. We're going to dry that skin off really well after taking out that little thermometer thing that doesn't work. Make sure you never use one of those. Also getting rid of the innards. Going to get the injection rolling with a cup of melted unsalted butter, a cup of some type of chicken broth. In this case, I'm using some chicken bone broth. We're going to go with a can of pineapple juice because pineapple juice does miracles for tenderizing meat, and it really doesn't leave a whole lot of after flavor or any at all. We're going to give that a stir, and now it's time to inject our bird. You can use any injector. I have this fancy one just because it was sent to me. However, you can use any injector. For the longest time, I used a $4.99 disposable injector over and over again. The trick about injecting any meat is getting as much of it in there as you can possibly get without damaging the meat any more than you have to. However, depending on your needle size, typically stabbing the bird all over the place isn't going to be a big deal. It's kind of like using a jacquard. You're kind of puncturing that skin, and it's going to allow the skin to crisp up nicely and tenderize the meat. One last tip before you're done injecting: go under the skin and shoot as much injection between the skin and the breast as you can possibly get, but be careful that you don't send injection spraying out one of the holes and make a complete mess. I'm going to go ahead and dump the rest of the injection in the pan. You don't want it covering the meat. You just want it covering the bottom of the pan. Dry that skin off. First, we're going to go ahead and put some oil on the turkey, and that's going to help us crisp the skin up and hold our seasonings. I'm going to start with a little SPG, and that's salt, pepper, garlic mix that I use. It's a custom blend. It's somewhere around 60% pepper, 40% salt, and a little bit of garlic. Now I'm going to go with this barbecue rub. I'm also going to use some thyme leaves as well as some rosemary, and I'm just kind of eyeballing this. I like this combination of savory spices with a barbecue rub. It's something I've been experimenting with lately, and I like it. If you can get that mixture just right, it's really wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and put a little extra salt on the skin, and that's to help make sure this skin dries out so it'll crisp up nicely during the cook. We're going to leave this turkey out with these seasonings, either in the refrigerator, or in my case, it's really cold on Delmarva today, 35 degrees, so I'm just going to leave it out on the table. But first, let's stuff it with some oranges, some onions, as well as some lemons, and drizzle some of that juice on top of the bird and in the pan, and it's going to make for some wonderful flavors to come through. Going to go ahead and top the pan off with just a little bit of bone broth. Like I said, you don't want to cover the bird, you just want to cover the bottom of the pan. After sitting out for about 45 minutes, we're going to go ahead and put this bird on the Rectech.
We are 2.5 hours in, and we started at 250 degrees Fahrenheit. Now it's time to go ahead and bump that up a little bit. And the reason I like to do that is at 250, you really get some great smoke on the meat. Once you cross over 3 hours or so, that starts to go down a little bit. And once you cross 4 hours, you're not really taking much of that smoke at all into the meat. And since this is Thanksgiving, I want to be cautious of other people's preferences. Personally, I like a little bit of a heavier smoke on my meat, but
You know, a lot of people think that that's a bitter flavor. So we're gonna go a little bit lighter on the smoke, which is why, one, I chose the pellet grill. And we're gonna go ahead and turn the heat up a little bit early so that we can go ahead and start crisping that skin up. Now, I'm using a pellet smoker today, but you can use anything. I mean, you can use a charcoal, you can use a pellet smoker, you can use a wood fire, you can use some type of electric or gas. You can even use an oven if you need to. However, the trick is to start gently, to bring the temperature up nice and slow, get some smoke on it if you're using something that'll give you some smoke, and then about, like I said, 2.5, 3.5 hours in, raise that temperature up and start really bringing that cooking process ahead and start crisping up that skin. And that's what I'm getting ready to do. I'm gonna raise the temperature to 325, and that's where we're gonna go for the rest of the cook. We're gonna go ahead and baste. I've been basting about every 45 minutes. Try not to knock any of the seasonings and rub off. Basting is great because you're cooking it when you baste. You see the steam hitting the meat. You're crisping that skin up. You're cooking that skin at a higher temperature than what it is just with the air contact. Basting is great in the first half of the cook. You want to try to avoid it when you're doing poultry on the second half of the cook, so that way you can get your skin nice and crispy. Good rule of thumb is go ahead and baste inside the turkey as well. That way you're cooking from all directions. 4 hours in, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and baste. And the next step in getting a perfectly juicy turkey is making sure that internal temperature is perfect. And the way that you wanna do that is you wanna stick this, you know, whatever thermopin you have, you wanna get the tip of it right down in the deepest part of the turkey that you can get. It's usually going to be like right in there, not against the bone. There we go. 38. Pull it back up until you see the lowest temperature. About 130. I'm going to go ahead and baste it one last time. So when that internal temperature hits 162, I'm gonna go ahead and pull it because it's gonna carry over and take it on up to 165. And the worst thing you can do to a turkey or a chicken is overcook it. You wanna hit that 165 perfectly. And probably the most important step in making sure you have a juicy turkey, letting it rest. Oven's off, just gonna let it sit there, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. The longer, the better. I just wouldn't go past 4 hours. All right, let's see how it came out. It is definitely, it looks really juicy. It smells wonderful. Let's see if it has that smokiness and that juiciness when you bite into it. When you take a bite of turkey breast and you have that, you know, like you need to have some water afterwards. That's, you know, it's not to say you've done anything wrong, but you don't have that perfect turkey. If you go through the steps we went through today and you brine it, you inject it, and you cook it very carefully, not to go over the temperature of 165, to let it rest, you're gonna have some juicy, wonderful turkey that everybody's gonna love. Tell us down in the comments if you have any tricks or tips. I hope you guys have an awesome Thanksgiving or a Merry Christmas or whatever time of year it is for you when you're watching this, but make sure you smoke a juicy turkey.